You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Data Center Therapy. I am your host, Matt. No vulnerabilities here, Yette. And alongside me is my co-host, Matt Cozzolino.
Can we load balance that intro?
Yeah, we need a secondary on that one. Yeah. Well, each episode, in addition to our jokes, we dive into the wide range of technologies that make up this beautiful sandbox called IT that we all play in. Beautiful and perilous, as we'll find out.
Mm-hmm.
We share our hopes and dreams, our opinions, both positive and critical alike, all with a touch of empathy, because at the end of the day, we all need a seat on that couch. One quick heads up, a couple reminders. One, if you're enjoying the podcast and you haven't yet, please subscribe. Just click that, what is it? Smash that like button for our younger listeners out there.
Smash that subscribe button.
Smash that subscribe button. Or just add us to your podcast listener. I used to use Overcast from an app standpoint. And now I'm back to the Apple Podcast app as it syncs up between my Mac and my iPad and my iPhone. But whatever app you use, please do subscribe. That would be very, very welcome. In addition, we have some marketing events coming up. Namely, from our last episode, you might remember Network Automation for Busy People, our virtual workshop series. That runs from August 4th to the 18th, a 2-week section that starts, August 4th is like 2 weeks away. So learn more and register now, right? At ivoxy.com/virtual-workshops. Okay, our main topic of the day. Cozzo, this is going to be a little bit of a spotlight on you because
right
you
up
have
my alley.
Yeah,
I'm like
you know
the F5 guy.
Yeah, and I, from a past life, managed an F5 and really was, talk about a product that is pretty ubiquitous.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know you need it until you need it, and then you love it because
Mm-hmm.
it just, and then when they say, hey, let's talk about this, it's, no, you guys just have this awesome load balancer. Keep giving me more of that.
That's what everyone hears. F5's a load balancer, but it does a lot more. Yep.
Right, and what are some of those things that it does? Okay, so I'll tell you, layman, I'll
Mm-hmm.
take the layman angle on this. I know they have an LTM and a GTM, and those product names may have changed at this point.
I think they have, yes.
Yes,
Yep.
but one of them is a local traffic manager, your traditional load balancer.
That's the load balancing bit, yep.
And you could also use that as a reverse proxy, is that right? Or is that a different component?
I think in the way that the reverse proxy context is used, yes. Really what you're doing with the load balancer is you're terminating the client session on the F5 and then reestablishing it to the service on the back end. So you can call that a reverse proxy if you do it differently, but yeah, basically.
Okay, and the other piece I'm very familiar with is the GTM, the Global Traffic Manager, which is basically LTM's action on each side, but it really enables your DR or multi-data center, cloud, whatever, presence of an application load balanced across multiple regions, and that does it with fancy DNS.
Yep, GTM is just the DNS, and I actually just had this conversation with another customer, and I thought it was great. It takes all of the things you would do manually in like Windows Active Directory and does it automatically. So I've got this site pointed to a CNAME over here to this one side, and it goes down, so I'm going to update that CNAME record. It does that automatically for you.
And that's all done with low time to live values, so there's not a lot of cache and propagation delays.
That's the idea. I do believe that I could stand up a DNS server and decide to cache for however long I want. So I can set this value on the front end, and it's up to everyone else to respect it. And if they don't, then tough luck. Yeah, no, there's not a lot. So yeah, LTM, the local traffic, GTM, which is DNS. I think it's big IP DNS or big DNS or something like that now. But really, F5 focuses on the application and the application delivery. Their tagline is "We make apps go faster." So they've got the web application firewall. They've got a single logon landing page. So instead of doing a full-on VPN connection, you can log on through this portal and it proxies your access to this app. They do, I said web application firewall, so that'll do stuff like input scrubbing, making sure you aren't putting in data that could be turned around and maliciously turned into something else by doing
So it's somewhat of a layer 7 firewall for web applications, or it can be. So it knows what a proper exchange traffic flow looks like.
Mm-hmm.
It says, hey, you can't do that.
Yeah, and it helps you tune that, and you can. There's all sorts of stuff there. That's actually where I struggle a bit with it, because once you start getting into that stuff, you're starting to look at this application and what's it doing and how's it working and what kind of inputs are we taking and what kind of outputs are we expecting and this and that and this and that, and it gets away from the infrastructure and what the infrastructure is doing, and it's looking more at
but
the
I mean, there's no easy button for truly understanding an application.
No, there isn't.
Right. I mean, that's not a bad. What you're saying is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, to understand the way an application works and the traffic patterns is something a good sysadmin, sysengineer probably should know.
Mm-hmm.
So, also part of what you're saying, it sounds like it's also a intrinsically, or it must be a trusted piece of your infrastructure. In terms of if it needs to talk on the back end to all of these applications, it has to have that implicit trust where it's a friendly.
Yep.
Which brings us to our topic.
It ends up with a leg in kind of all of the different networks. And recently, so our core topic here, recently there was, what was it? CVE 2020-5902. So the remote code execution vulnerability on the F5. And so we spent a minute looking at that. Found a link here. The NCC group did a nice write-up on what it is, how it works. And I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to what, a misplaced semicolon, I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a few. It seems like there's a few areas where things fell over. The vulnerability is what it is, but there's always, what is the attack vector?
Right. And
again, it comes. Well, a lot of times we hear, not to pick on Linksys. Linksys is the name. TP-Link. Give me your small office, home office, and really home office only, and even not office, like home user level router, and it's always, well, the management interface, the default passwords all over the internet, and the management interface is enabled on the WAN, out to the public by default, right? And that's always, no matter if the password's easy or hard to guess, it's don't have that. You don't need that.
Right.
In this case, the vulnerability does require management access from the internet, and you say, well, did F5 goof and have that on by default? Absolutely not. Actually, it's not a default situation where that interface is enabled to the WAN. But Cozzo, tell me what you've run into a lot of times out there with asks regarding that.
So, kind of understanding how a lot of these devices are structured, and it isn't just F5 that actually does this. It's a lot of different vendors. NetApp has their SIMC. All of your servers have your ILO, your DRAC, your whatever
the concept
connection.
of out of band.
Yeah, your out of band management interface. So the F5's got that same device. The requirement there is that management interface is on a different network than all of your data interfaces, because it's an out of band interface to interact with the box through. So usually it'll come up. I'll see it from a customer support point of view where we're deploying this thing and we need a separate management network interface for this device over here. And the ask is that, well, I don't want to go to this totally separate address space to get to this box. I want to manage it through where I manage all of the rest of my stuff, and that happens to be a server interface, and that happens to host data traffic on it, and
I found that was especially common in the days of mostly physical appliance hardware too. Oh, I gotta run a drop all the way over to this switch, all the way to where the F5 it might be in my handoff rack because it's so close to the edge, and all my management stuff's back here. I'll just manage it inline.
So the end result is that we turn on that admin access, that management connectivity through that data port, and now we're susceptible to this vulnerability. Right.
Well, yeah. Well, okay. So it's related to the TMUI, the Traffic Management User Interface, as you were talking about. And so there's some interesting bits about this, but it is a vulnerability in the in F5's implementation of Apache Tomcat. Now, that might be a confusing term because Apache's a web server. Well, Apache's a foundation that's got a number of bits of software underneath and developed by it and stewarded by it. And Apache is one of them. Apache HTTP. Sorry, Matt?
They've even got a software licensing
Right.
model, yeah.
Right. If we want to really watch some paint dry, we'll go into that next episode. But so there's the Apache HTTPD server. That's what runs half or more of
A
the
whole
internet.
bunch, yeah.
Right. I run it. Matt runs it. I mean, there's that, and then there's Tomcat, which is not too dissimilar outside of the fact that when you look it up, you'll read it's a servlet. It's basically an application server. It can serve static pages like Apache was originally destined to do, and then Apache could leverage their modules like mod PHP, mod rewrite, do stuff like that to essentially plug in dynamic page engines like PHP. What Tomcat will do is it will run Java applications.
Java.
And what people will also do is they will then spin up a HTTPD alongside of it, Apache alongside of it to run its static stuff, even though Tomcat has a component called Tomcat Catalina, which will also do the Apache bit of it, right? But a lot of people ignore that and they just stand up an instance of Apache alongside Tomcat, and away we go. Here's the rub. So Apache and Tomcat, even though they're both Apache products, handle characters differently on URL inputs.
Yep.
And Tomcat apparently treated in this version a semicolon as a directory.
Yeah. And that's
that's
what it was. It was the end of the string, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've run websites for a number of years, coming up on 20, and injection attacks are just nasty.
Yeah.
Because with this dynamic, you want to pass variables, you want to pass strings back, and then your code eventually takes that input and says, okay, I'm going to build a SQL query off of that. And you cannot just blindly trust that, because people will dump out of the query you're trying to run and run a whole other query into your database.
You got to kind of assume there's the million monkeys sitting behind it, typing away at everything, right? You're going to get anything.
And they are.
There are, yeah.
And they are. I've gotten emails from Russian, supposedly hackers or whatever, script kiddies. Hey, I found a thing on your site. Well, I shut the loophole down, and he got angry that I didn't want to pay him for it. But it's hardly nasty. It's just something that you should be scrubbing all inputs. But apparently, in this case, it allows a string to be injected in that basically says run this arbitrary bit of code. And when you have a device such as an F5 that's a trusted piece of equipment on your network and your infrastructure that has access to the back end stuff, right? It's very bad if that gets compromised. And in this case, there was a compromise out in the wild, and F5's notice was basically, if you have this management interface exposed to the internet, you can go ahead and assume that you've been compromised, and you should do this, and the other thing. Not good. So what basically have they done? They release mitigation steps, but they also have a software patch, right?
Right. So depending on how you want to address it, right, you can go in and update the files. The command line on the F5s has basically it's a Linux box, right? Like most things are these days. So you can get in there and edit the files, update all of the stuff. You can add the asterisk to the end of the file. They've got the specific steps to address that. One of them is update the file. One of them is restrict access from source addressing, as well as doing the full software patch. And the trade-off there is, do I have scheduled time for a maintenance window? Can I do this during the middle of the day, which is the preferred solution? Just upgrade the whole instance to the newer version of code that addresses it. If you can't, then you can run these mitigation steps against it to resolve the problem.
Yeah, originally there was a single mitigation, which was basically it's basically a location match a parameter that basically says, hey, if the URL string contains a semicolon anywhere, dump out, give them a 404. And then there was the backend HSQL database turned into a second vector, and basically they just put a whack on that. If you try to reference that path either, you're redirected to a 404. Oops.
Right.
It's a fairly simple fix, which can make the fact about the vulnerability even more infuriating.
A little bit. Yeah.
Come on. Now, this would not have a semicolon wouldn't have hit the standard Apache web server, but a standard Apache can't run Java
because of how Tomcat and Apache handles those two different string
Mhm.
inputs, right? Yeah.
Mhm. So even though they perform similar functions, they're similar spheres. They're vastly different products, and whether this was just an oversight or maybe somebody thought, hey, Apache just escapes semicolons or whatever. It's an interesting oops, but from what I understand, F5 was pretty quick in responding to this,
Yeah.
which is good.
Yeah.
So that's good to see. Not that you want to see a vulnerability take down an infrastructure provider, but uh, there's really only one true way to to test the metal
Mm-hmm.
of
You can do all the
of
testing in house, but then once you get it out there to the rest of the world, right? That's
right.
really where
And how does a company respond when it really hits the fan? And I got to give kudos. No software is perfect. You hope external facing ones are about as bulletproof as possible. This would not be termed bulletproof, this vulnerability, but it's those weird little things that usually are the weak parts. But really encouraging to see how they responded to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I agree.
we had some customers get hit with this.
We did.
I'm not asking you to name names, but
I spent
were we able to help them?
Yep, I spent a couple hours on the phone with a couple of customers. We've done a couple of redeploys, import a config, re-import the config, some software updates. One of them actually had a forensics company that they're working with that they actually took the F5 instance and uploaded it to them and said, "Hey,
Okay.
take a look at this. Tell us what else may have happened because this happened." Um, Interesting kind of mitigation pieces. If you've got this device compromised, there's some other things that live on there, like your public-facing certificate key for your
And the
website.
key. What
Right?
about the private key?
That's the right. So
not public. Yeah.
not the
Oh, you mean your private key is now public facing?
the private right. So the key that you use to secure this asterisk dot
Yes.
star dot whatever website is now on this box that's been compromised. So let's assume that's compromised as well, which
Yep.
then triggers a whole. We've got to regenerate the key and reissue the cert and redeploy it and put it back everywhere else. So it's not just fix the box. There's a whole bunch more to it.
So from a fix standpoint, it sounds like it's not a big investment of time. Reach out, give us a ring.
Yeah.
And we can certainly help you on your way for that. But then the after effects, where it's let's look at what else could be. Make sure to check this, and this. There are some things that people will want to go through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we seeing? I don't know if you've seen this personally or read about it. Is this basically to gain remote access to a network, or is this more about exfiltration of key data?
Well, I mean, I
suppose it could be either.
If you switch gears and take a look at what can I do with this tool, right? I could use this hammer to pound some nails. I could use this hammer to break a window, right?
Yeah. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, it is. Fortunately, I haven't heard anyone, any of our customers that have had this happen and then had something like a crypto locker. So it's the trade-off between this is where we got in and maybe exfilled some data that was easy to access. But if there's things like we aren't necessarily plugged into the Active Directory infrastructure, then is there a path for me to okay, I'm in the environment, but how do I log into the next thing? That kind of potentially adds some security and some safety.
I'd say the least threatening scenario I can think of is if you have an F5 fronting and only fronting like a VDI environment.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, you could theoretically roll your image back or whatever. If it hasn't even changed, you're probably fine. Redeploy all of your desktops, redeploy your certificates, and you probably are in the clear in terms of any data that might have gotten chucked off.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of goes straight into what does the F5 do for a VDI environment, right? And it doesn't actually handle, I mean, it handles the traffic for VDI, but it doesn't interact with the
file
actual
systems.
Right. It doesn't touch that. It says here's your end user connectivity to this desktop. All I'm doing is presenting that PC over IP or blast connection or whatever it is, and proxying the handshake to the end device. There
Yeah.
shouldn't be
I
any.
worry about it being able to just be a launching pad to launch attacks internally or gather intel internally seems to be a real
Right,
dangerous use of it.
right. Instead of having someone on that, hard candy exterior of your network, they're now inside, sitting there with layer 2 adjacency to everything else that's on your
Right.
management network, right? That's then the more concerning piece.
So you know what I found interesting? It sounds like, and I'm not sure, you probably know this. I don't know how much thought you've given it, but do you remember last year? I know 2019 feels like about 300 years ago at this point,
A little
but
bit.
do you remember when F5 acquired Nginx?
Yes, I do.
And so I was reading, I'm like, Tomcat, Apache, didn't they just buy Nginx like a year ago? Um,
Yeah.
I did a little further research on that though.
Hmm.
In terms of Nginx, it doesn't appear to be. And I don't know if this is their internal goal. I don't think that they have visions of replacing or building their internal products on Nginx. Um, I think reading some of the sifting through the architecture, right, is
Hmm.
in that the idea is Nginx was supposed to get them closer to DevOps, where F5 Big IP is an infrastructure piece. They didn't feel like it was extraordinarily agile in terms of um, load balancing when it comes to DevOps in that quick agile based code approach with all these changes in DevOps guys provisioning infrastructure. The F5 was by itself was kind of the slowest kid in the race, right? Um,
They've addressed a whole lot of that. You can script a whole lot of stuff against the F5.
Well,
So,
yes, but I think
mhm.
what they're doing is they're also taking an already favorite child of the DevOps group, and that's Nginx, and the load balancing functions of that. And a recommended layout is just keep your F5s there on the edge,
Mhm.
keep on load balancing your infrastructure, but then front your rapidly changing dev test stuff with a couple of or more scalable Nginx or Nginx Plus with the Nginx controller that is kind of the orchestrator behind spinning out Nginx instances for load balancing your dev stuff without necessarily having to touch the F5 a whole lot.
Yeah.
So because I'm like, why don't they just run Nginx why don't they plug that in instead of Tomcat? But it
There's
doesn't seem to be the goal.
there's a big difference there. Nginx was built to be faster than Apache, and we're
Hmm.
talking about straight web servers. I do, from my testing, from where I'm using it, I do like that it's really easy to present this fairly small config file for the entire web server. And here
Hmm.
you go, web server, and it's not disjointed and spread all over the place like I feel Apache ends up being. Um,
You run into that same paradigm you do with so many of the products that we recommend and build our
they
solutions
grow,
with,
grow,
in
grow.
that you can get really robust feature sets or you can have simplicity, but never the two shall truly live together.
Right. What is it?
Um,
My woodshop teacher in high school, it was you can have it cheap, you can have it easy, or you can have it quick. But you can only pick two, right?
yep, it's so true. It really is. And so Apache, for all of its feature set and capability, um, it's a little. I wouldn't say bloated is a word, but it's certainly not light and fast. I think for a little while you saw that light HTTPD out there I think Nginx has kind of taken its place as the lightweight static page. Now it can use a PHP process to again backend it, but it basically kicks that off to a separate process to handle the dynamic content and kick the static stuff back up.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I use it. I use it internally and in our lab for reverse proxying, which is one half step away from load balancing, right?
Yep.
Um, but you can do all kinds of input validation there if you'd like. Uh, but that also makes the cloud story a lot easier too,
Yeah.
because as long as if you want, you can have that be your external access point, and everybody touches it. Now you don't care what cloud or what other IP address you're running on, as long as the backend has access to it,
Mm-hmm.
which is
That's the
neat.
whole idea there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like it for the reverse proxying. You've started using it for that as well.
I did. That's where I ended up heading when I started doing my Let's Encrypt project. So I've got a handful of services that I want to write a
Hmm.
cert for. So it's been way easier to write the Ansible script, generate the cert, request the cert, drop it onto this box, restart Nginx,
Yep.
done. Right. Oh, I want a new
Yeah.
service here. Let's take that Nginx template, drop in the couple of variables, deploy it, request a cert, restart.
And you're doing that from the front end. Are you doing HTTP on the back end, just non-encrypted from the Nginx box to your app?
Um,
That's what I'm doing so far. I'm not doing double HTTPS.
Yes, that's
the idea, I think, too.
That's correct. There's kind of two ways to address that. If the internal service supports HTTPS, then I can use HTTPS, and it's the question
But
of
the problem of renewing those certificates, because
Right.
those aren't external facing, and doing that whole thing. You can use DNS with a provider that leverages an API, right? But not all of them do.
Well, I mean, it's not even that, right? It's go request that certificate and put it on a Nginx box
Right.
instead of go request the
That's true.
certificate and then install it on this app.
And pull it
make
back down.
this app use it, and then install it on this app and make this app use it, and then install it on this app and make this app
Yep.
use it, right?
You say Ansible, that's where your automation really comes in.
Right. So I can deploy this thing, and there's some care and feeding of getting this app deployed, and then it lives on this internal address on port 8080 or 72143 whatever, right?
But if you don't put the SSL on the internal box and only let your Nginx front end handle that,
So
it becomes extraordinarily easy, because you run your Let's Encrypt script once a night, and any certs that need to be updated are done, restarts the service, and you're done.
So let's clarify something. When you say run SSL internally, are you talking specifically about that public-facing signed trusted cert?
It would be, well, it doesn't need to be. It doesn't have
Right,
to be.
exactly. So that's what I was saying. It doesn't have to be encrypted. If it is, I'll turn on HTTPS and prefer it, and then just leave the self-signed cert on the application.
Right.
And then Nginx, it's still encrypted internally, but it's using self-signed certs, because then I don't have to deal with getting that application to use this correct
That's a good point.
cert.
And which is still better yet than just unencrypted
Right.
HTTP.
Right.
That's a good point.
Right.
That's a good point.
Certs, dude, that's one. What, this last couple of years, I feel certs were always this mythical thing, and they're just I've had to deal with them so much recently that it's like trial by fire. You learn the hard way what all these certs do and what all these components are.
Passwords are over.
Yeah.
I mean, it's come to the point where they'll never go away, probably, but ultimately they're not a reliable form of security. Social engineering, especially, is way too pervasive, way too effective.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Apple's done a lot for using biometrics for security and having it actually be secure. I am not a fan of Face ID over Touch ID, and I do hope for the return of Touch ID, actually. But overall, not having to struggle typing onto my phone keyboard, which is just a constant source of pain for me, is a good thing. No repeated passwords, et cetera, et cetera. But you see two-factor authentication being a thing, but certificates and client certs, I think, are a good way of doing that. But again, no big easy button on that at all.
Well, it's not just a single factor. It's not just a biometric thing. It's got to be multi-factor. That's why, right? So that goes back to the something you know, something you are, something you have. Right. Pick a couple.
They since fixed it, and I won't name the financial institution, but I have an account at a bank, bank/credit union, whatever you want, a financial institution, and they have an app. And the app is what? On your phone, right? Okay, fine. Again, they fixed it, but for a time there, I would log in with the app that was using Face ID, right? Face ID. And then it would insist on two-factor, so it would send what? A text message. Well, with a code. Well, if I've already authenticated with Face ID on said mobile device, the text message you send to said mobile device would already be compromised. It is not even close to being a second. It's not two-factor at that point, technically.
Well, SMS is hard that way. Like using SMS for authentication, because there is that whole
SIM hijacking.
SIM hijacking, yeah, where you can let me scan your SIM card. But even
forget about that. The fact that I'm using an app on the phone means that I have the phone the device you're sending the code to is the same device I've authenticated with my face. So that right there is not secure. if I was logging in on my desktop to the website and then it pings my phone with an SMS, at least that's two-factor because I have to authenticate against that second device to grab that code. I have to own that device. But if I steal this phone out of your pocket, Matt, and somehow I log into the app and then I run, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then they send a text message. Well, that didn't secure anything because the same guy who broke into the app has the text message you just sent.
Yep.
So it's like they stopped doing that,
Mm-hmm.
thankfully. It was really obnoxious on top of that because I'm like, I just authenticated with my ugly mug, and everybody, thank goodness you don't share this face, so nobody else can use the app. But yeah, that's also the low hanging fruit where not every
That two-factor implementation is rough sometimes.
yeah. I'm using Authy here and there. I'm working that in a little bit more.
Authy.
Yeah, AKA it's a two-factor auth not owned by Google, so
Okay.
it already is appealing to me.
Mm-hmm.
But
I grabbed a YubiKey, one of those USB.
yeah, more and more people are using the hardware stuff.
Mm-hmm. And that hangs out on a keychain. And if I'm authenticating into something that I really care about, so for me it's my Gmail and my password safe. Those are the big ones. If it's been
Great,
offline.
another reason to get stressed about losing my keys.
I mean, truly, it like hangs out.
Truly,
It doesn't end up on my keys, right? It's the other keys that don't move very much.
I can't find it. It's probably gone. But I'm telling you, 15, 16, 17 years ago, I opened a PayPal account, and at a time they were giving them away, and then you could buy another one for $5. They would give you a physical key. You'd press a button, and it would run an algo and give you a 6-digit number based on that.
Like
You'd
those
log
RSA
in, you say,
keys. Yeah.
it was true 2FA 15, 16, 17 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they still do that, but it was interesting that that's now coming back and it's the rage. Yeah, my Authy is nice. I just I'll tell you, I use it for Namecheap. I've got a lot of my domains through Namecheap, and I turned it on there. And basically, you log in, then it says put your 2FA code in. You open the app, you tap on your Namecheap profile, and it just gives you a 6-digit code that expires in 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's that. It's the same thing. RSA's got a software app you can install on your phone. Back when they first started doing that, I remember getting that same kind of thing. Here's this key with this old school LCD screen on it, and it would just, like a watch screen. And it would just roll through a new key every 30 seconds or 60 seconds or whatever. Yeah. Same process. It's just on your phone versus this physical thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's truly two-factor, and I feel like two-factor properly implemented is about as secure as you can make it too. I mean, it's a really, really effective security model. So it's good to see more and more people supporting it. Gmail, I'm guessing only when you log in through like a web interface it'll prompt you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't log into my Gmail anywhere other than a web interface.
Right, it's on your phone, and you don't have to do anything with that.
Right, my phone is two-factor in that I've got fingerprint, I've got passcode, and a device. It will prompt me every now and then. So like my web browser on the computer will ask me every month and a half to, hey, log back in, because I've been logged into this one session for so long. And it's
kind of like your TV apps. If you've got a cable credentials that ask you every day to log back in.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Very, very, very integrated.
Speaking of that, like the Xbox, there's been a couple others that, here, let me get this thing set up, and it's like it pops up the login page and asks you to type in your username and password on the TV using a remote or something.
Oof.
And other ones, I'm super happy that they do this, where it pops up and says, hey, looks like you're trying to log in. Go to this site with this like
the link.
4-character URL. And it says, hey, do you want to connect this to your device? Yes. Click, and poof, it's done.
Oh, and you actually have a keyboard you can use on this device that you're accessing.
Because I can go to my desktop. I can go to my computer, right?
Yes. Oof.
That. Security. It's fun. It's super deep.
Well, if you want to talk about any of this with us, definitely reach out. You can hit us at podcast@ivoxy.com. Got a lot of experience with the F5s. They're great devices, and hopefully nobody got that we were picking on them today. It was just simply an opportunity to take an incident and dig into the root cause analysis. RCA is fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
I had one, and I'm going to botch the details as I gloss over this, but my last where I worked my last time, we had an office outside of about 40 minutes outside of London, and they were served by British Telecom.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a small town called Stokenchurch, but it was this brick office building, beautiful building, not huge, but a nice building, and out back there were piles of cow manure and rolling hills where we'd watch people hunt pheasants in the back. Like, so really this like convergence of farmland and commerce.
Mm-hmm.
And of course we had fiber running into the building. And I think this was back in like 2010, 11, so we had a 100 meg connection. It was pretty nice. Well, I mean, that's what we had provisioned. We were getting nowhere close to that. And I would do UDP speed tests, and I would realize 100 meg. I would try a TCP speed test and get 10% of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was on months of back and forth with BT. And ultimately, Google had a presentation. They needed like a half gig connection set up at this convention center tomorrow. And they ran into the same issue. Well, imagine that the Google could actually move mountains and get them to actually dive in. The root cause was their MPLS network that they were using had some kind of addressing. The MAC addresses matched, or thought it was an IP address, and it was dropping packets. With UDP, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
because right.
I've read a couple of those that kind of traffic shaping or something on the.
Yep. Yeah. But I mean, that was one of the more interesting root cause analyses that I've been a part of. But these are fun, and F5 gave us an opportunity to crack it open, and kudos to them that they were able to react quickly and put out some pretty clear and easy to implement mitigations. If you want to talk more about it, we can absolutely help with that. And make sure some of those other things the boxes are checked, certificates, management access, proper out-of-band configuration as well. All good things.
Yep.
You have anything to add to that, Mr. Cozzolino?
We'd probably want to talk a little bit about our ISO 2701?
27001.
27001. That's all security like, right?
Yeah. No. Well, tell us about it.
Alec teaches it.
That is
I don't know.
True.
That's kind of outside of my day-to-day stuff. A lot of when we start talking about. You
don't know everything about everything? You don't know everything about.
Unfortunately, I don't. The ISO 27001 highlights a lot of the things that aren't technology driven. So it highlights the need for administration to buy into this policy, and hey, we are going to pay attention to this, and we are going to do audits, and we are going to address it, and we're going to set and all of that. You can't fix that. You can't address that with a box. I can't buy a widget and install it and suddenly everything's fixed. It's operational. Right. It's dealing with the internal people and how you work as a company. So
not always the fun bits, but I mean, like it or not, I mean, anybody who works in IT, you've been subject to audits, and it's just a necessary evil, and it's just something, have to deal with it. We'll all be better off in the end, but we definitely can walk you through that as well. The aforementioned workshops from Alec for the network automation, that he was doing the 27001 as well. We're happy to chat about that too. Once again, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Overcast. Find us at ivoxy.com. We are on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And if you've got questions, we have the email address as well, podcast@ivoxyconsulting, or ivoxy.com. I'm just kind of rambling now. Mr. Cozzo, thank you for joining us. Really good to chat with you, my friend.
My pleasure.
Thanks, everybody out there, for listening to Data Center Therapy. Have a great day.